In the films and television, the Arab is associated either with lechery or bloodthirsty dishonesty. He appears as an oversexed degenerate, capable, it is true, of cleverly devious intrigues, but essentially sadistic, treacherous, low. Slave trader, camel driver, money changer, colorful scoundrel. These are some traditional Arab roles in the cinema. The Arab leader of martyrs, pirates, native insurgents can often be seen snarling at the captured Western hero and the blonde girl, both of them steeped in wholesomeness. My men aren't going to kill you, but they like to amuse themselves before, he leers suggestively as he speaks. This is a current debasement of Valentino's Sheikh. In newsreels or news photos, the Arab is always shown in large numbers. No individuality, no personal characteristics or experiences. Most of the pictures represent mass rage and misery, or irrational hints, hopelessly eccentric gestures. Lurking behind all of these images is the menace of jihad. Consequence, a fear that Muslims or Arabs will take over the world. Hey guys, media has a huge influence on our lives. It often influences our perceptions and opinions either consciously or subconsciously. Whether this media is film, video games, news, or music, the way people are represented in media leave a print in our minds that often affect how we view others. And in this video, I would like to talk about a specific people whose representation is, in many ways, parallel to that of the Jews during the Nazi regime and other similar spearing propaganda campaigns. I would like to talk about Arabs in media. Real Bad Arabs is the name of a book and a documentary that discusses Arab representation in Hollywood before 9/11, more precisely between 1896 and the year 2000. Media critic Jack Shaheen, the writer of the book, watched and analyzed 1,000 American movies to determine whether these movies had a positive, neutral, or negative representation of Arabs. And surprisingly or unsurprisingly, depending on who you are, 936 of these movies had a negative portrayal of Arabs. And again, just as a reminder, this is before 9/11. The negative stereotypes I'm going to discuss in this video are also mentioned, although rather briefly, in Edward Said's Orientalism. It is a book that discusses the Western view of the Orient and how the Western view of the Orient changed throughout history. In the book's latest chapter, Said discusses briefly the popular images of Semites in media and the switch of replacing the Jew by the Arab after the Second World War. Jack Shaheen called what I'm going to talk about right now Arabland, but I prefer the name Arabia with a little trademark on top. The representation of Arabia in history of cinema starts as early as Georges Méliès. You know the guy from La Voyage dans la Lune or A Trip to the Moon, one of the most important early directors in the history of cinema? Well, in 1905, Georges Méliès put out The Palace of Arabian Nights, where you have scenes such as this. And this. But there is one aspect of Arabia missing from this movie, and that is the vast desert. And a good introduction of the vast desert is Porky Pig and Alibaba Bound. Porky Pig is a Looney Tunes character for the two people who don't know that. Anyways, there's this cartoon called Alibaba Bound starring our cute American pig where the Arabs, and I shit you not, are depicted as human animals.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם, אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם, אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם.
That is, humans who act like animals. The villain, creatively named Alibaba, barks at the Arabs, and again, the Arabs are portrayed as humans who act like animals. Meanwhile, Porky is depicted as a cute little pig that acts like a human. I would not have any problem with depicting, I don't know, animals interacting with each other, but at this point, it's just plain dehumanization. Anyway, the cartoon starts depicting this vast desert, and our cute pig coming out of a bar, I assume, called the Brown Turban. Then when a spy tells Porky that Alibaba and his dirty sleeves plan to attack the desert fort, what Porky does is he goes to the "you drive to rent a camel," naturally of course, and then the villain is shown. Alibaba is barking to go attack Porky in his desert fortress. And then you might ask, how are these desert inhabitants attacking Porky? Well, by hitting the door with a guy who's being fed headache pills, whatever the fuck that is. And literally climbing the wall like a monkey.
Hooray! Boy!
Anyways, some more goofy stuff happens and that's that, but I might hear you say, well, aren't these too old? Haven't the times changed now? Well, if you haven't consumed any American media ever, you probably know the answer to that, but that's enough of Arabia. Let's take a look at other stereotypes. Arabia is gonna come up in pretty much all of our next stereotypes anyways. Now for sheikhs, which is a word that means old man in Arabic among other things, and usually calling someone a sheikh entails them being well respected within the family or the community. They are portrayed in equally caricature-like ways, either as horny simping men who are drooling at the sight of a blonde woman, or as dumb terrorist masterminds, and yes, dumb and masterminds at the same time, who want to plan the destruction of something Western. For the simping sheikhs, we got Cannonball Run 2, where the Arab guy is just presented as the type of guy that would fly girls out for a night and has no value for money whatsoever. On top of all of that, he can't control himself around blonde women, staring at their breasts, touching them, and the motherfucker literally says, "I have a weakness for blondes," just in case the viewer is that dumb and didn't get the hint, I think.
One actor who excels in his portrayal of Arabs as buffoons is Jamie Farr in Cannonball Run 2.
I have a weakness for blondes and women without mustaches.
All the stereotypes are here. Too rich and stupid to know the value of money.
Get me 12 sweets. Better yet, the entire floor.
And of course he's oversexed, lecherous, uncontrollably obsessed with the American woman.
Here, my desert blossom. Give the change. Have you ever considered joining a harem?
Now as for the other type of sheikhs, the terrorist guy who wants to blow stuff up all the time, you got 1998's Ernest in the Army, which is, I guess, a satirical movie, but that's the excuse they all use for racist depictions of Arabs.
Today we celebrate tomorrow's certain sacred victory over the Americans. And tomorrow we will pierce the heart of the eagle, and all the land will praise Omar Habib Tufuti, President for Life of Aritzia.
Help us, please. Please, help us.
Okay, look, no problem. I'll have you out here in a jiffy.
Ernest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Allah be praised. You have saved us. You must be the great American warrior of the prophecy.
Oh, shucks, it was nothing. You must have me confused with some other great American warrior.
And yes, of course they kidnapped a blonde woman in this one too. For this part, I will just show one little scene from 1984's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I will be honest, I have not watched this movie, and based on this scene, I very much would not like to. Although I'm sure Matthew Gates here will disagree with me, as he called this scene the best moment in cinema's history. Well, if he says so. The second one is this comedy, quote-unquote, movie from 2008 called You Don't Mess with the Zohan. It's the story of an Israeli super soldier who's tired of the everlasting conflict in Israel, so he starts killing these disposable Arabs in a funny, haha, way. After Zohan tells his parents that he wants to cut hair, they laugh him out and they tell him to stay in the army. He is later tasked with killing a Palestinian militant, where he fakes his own death and escapes to New York, where he starts to cut hair. Throughout the movie, the very dumb Oriental-looking men, which turned out they are Hezbollah, at the end of the day, so Lebanese probably, they tried to kill him, and then he solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and marries an Arab woman, I guess, to say that they established peace. What this movie manages to do is fall in line alongside any other movie that depicts the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It manages to show Israelis as the ones who want peace, the ones who just would like to exist, the ones who are not doing anything wrong. Meanwhile, Israel is the one that's carrying out an occupation against the Palestinian people. Now on to the good army versus evil dehumanization tactic. Let's start by our first example, which is Homeland. According to its official website, Homeland is an edge-of-your-seat sensation. The show is based on an Israeli TV show called Prisoner of War, which was acquired by 20th Century Fox Television and adopted into Homeland for American audiences. It portrays Arabs as one-dimensional Orientalist tropes, evil, devious people from faraway land that want to harm the civilized, ethical, progressive Americans fighting to protect their homeland. Another example of this trope is James Cameron's 1994 film True Lies, where this terrorist is threatening to detonate a nuclear warhead if the demands are not met, and this terrorist Arab goofball and his Arab terrorist friends did not notice that the little girl took the key out. I mean, how stupid are they? Am I right?
This is a communique from Crimson Jihad. You have seen a demonstration of our power. Do not force us to destroy this city and do not try to use force against us. We are all prepared to die. One turn of that key, 2 million of your people will die instantly. What key? That key! Who's taking the key? Shoot us!
Argo, American Sniper, Good Kill, Lone Survivor, Green Zone, The Outpost, Black Sunday, The Fury, Spawn, and the list goes on and on and on. All of these and others show Arabs or Muslims as terrorists, disposable, killed only as collateral damage for the greater good by the complex moral army of the USA. Now on to the parallels to Nazi representation of Jews. I will start this part by quoting Real Bad Arabs again. I think it will be better than anything that I can write, so here we go. Arabs, like Jews, are Semites. So it's perhaps not too surprising that Hollywood's image of hook-nosed, roped Arabs parallels the image of Jews in Nazi-inspired movies, such as Robert und Bertram, Die Rothschilds Aktien von Waterloo, Der ewige Jude, and Judsus. Once upon a cinematic time, screen Jews boasted exaggerated nostrils and dressed differently, in yarmulkes and dark robes, than other films' protagonists. In the past, Jews were projected as the other, depraved and predatory money grubbers who seek world domination, worship a different god, and kill innocents. Nazi propaganda also presented the lecherous Jew, slinking in the shadows, scheming to snare the blonde Aryan virgin. I would like to also quote Orientalism here, to put into consideration when this change happened and why. Yet, after the 1973 war, the Arab appeared everywhere as something more menacing. Cartoons depicting an Arab sheikh standing behind a gasoline pump turned up constantly. These Arabs, however, were clearly Semitic. Their sharply hooked noses, the evil mustachioed leer on their faces, were obvious reminders to a largely non-Semitic people that Semites were at the bottom of all of our troubles, which in this case was principally a gasoline shortage. The transference of an anti-Semitic animus from a Jewish to an Arab target was made smoothly, since the figure was essentially the same. Now let's look at the intro of the Rothschilds' Aktien auf Waterloo, or the Rothschilds' shares in Waterloo. The movie describes itself as a historically accurate story of how the Rothschilds became rich. I do not think that it will be very difficult to distinguish who the Jewish person is throughout the movie, even if you do not speak the language. If not through the exaggerated nose size, yarmulke, and black robe, it will be through his actions and even the way he moves throughout this shitty piece of Nazi propaganda.
Hochgesindel!
Fürstliche Hoheit, welche Gnade!
Keine Titulaturen!
Weiß.
Willst du mich denn hier empfangen?
Stiege hinauf, wenn's gefährlich ist. Mein bestes Zimmer für Eure kurfürstliche Hoheit.
Keine Titulaturen, sag ich dir. Ja. Nein, hab ich gesagt, du Schafskopf. Was wartest du noch? Grinse nicht. Ich weiß, was da drin ist.
5%ige Obligation auf die Bank von England.
Gut. Ich sehe, du verstehst dein Geschäft.
Let's take a look at another example, Yudsus. At the beginning, the music is cheerful, the people are happy and everyone looks clean and well dressed up. And then this man decides to go to the Jewish neighborhood. And just look at this disgusting shit.
Ich will nicht, dass du ihn in der Judengasse hältst. Jawohl. Ich will zu Herrn Oppenheimer.
Sie ist Oppenheimer erwartet, Euer Exzellenz.
Märchenhaft. Märchenhaft. Wirklich märchenhaft. Aber zu groß für uns.
Zu groß für eine Herzogin?
If you just use these two examples to draw parallels to Arab representation in media, the large nose is replaced by a long beard, and sometimes the large nose just stays. The yarmulke is replaced by the shmar and egar and whatever else Arabs wear on their heads. The Jewish neighborhood is replaced by an empty desert where these uncivilized people live alone, separate from society and civilization, while they actively want to destroy it. Either because of their hoarding of wealth and immoral financial practices, or because they will blow themselves up and our cities along with them. The parallels are clear and the intent is as well. Dehumanize these people. Jack Shaheen, a couple of paragraphs later, quotes film critic Anthony Lane saying, "Finally, there is the Arab question. The Arab people have always had the roughest and most uncomprehending deal from Hollywood. But with the death of the Cold War, the stereotype has been granted even more rich prominence. In The Mummy 1999, I could scarcely believe what I was watching. So here's a party game for any producers with a Middle Eastern setting in mind. Try replacing one Semitic group with another, Jews instead of Arabs, and then listen for the laugh. Aladdin is just disgusting, to be honest. Aladdin is fully inspired by an Orientalist look on the Middle East, Turkey, India, and whatever else you can fit in there. From the fashion to where the film takes place to the characters, it's just a mess of stereotypes. False or romanticized stories and paintings of the Orient. These stories and imagery were then exaggerated when put into this abomination of a repetitive mold of Disney princess movie trademark. And out of the other side, Aladdin was shit out. When the movie first released in 1992, the song Arabian Nights, which is the opening song, had this part that's not there anymore. The part said, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's hope. In 1993, after an outcry from the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, it was replaced with, where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's hope. Another more personal critique of Arabian Nights is just that the music is so stereotypical of the Orient as the yellow filter on movies is for Mexico. Arabian Nights, however, is not the only thing that was changed about Aladdin. The city where Aladdin was supposed to take place was also changed. It was supposed to take place in Baghdad. But because of the US was, bombing Iraq at the time during the Gulf War, it was later changed to the fictional city of Agrabah. But fun fact, 30% of 532 Republicans polled in 2015 supported bombing, and 19% of the Democrats polled as well. So here is your social commentary on the level of education in the US, I guess. Now let's do something a bit different to wrap up this Aladdin part, because it's honestly getting on my nerves. I'll just ask a bunch of questions that show why I fucking hate Aladdin, and I'll give you some sources on where to find these answers. So,
lightning round.
Why is Aladdin wearing a sirwal, a vest that's usually worn on top of underwear, and a mini tarbouch? Why is Jasmine the most sexualized out of all of the princesses? Why do the good guys have a Western accent while the evil ones have an Arab or a Middle Eastern one? Why is Taj Mahal in Agrabah if Agrabah was supposed to be Baghdad? And why is Agrabah again, if it was supposed to be Baghdad, in the middle of the desert while Baghdad has the Tigris running through it? Why is there a pet tiger? Is that related to the Taj Mahal incident? These are just some of the questions that I have in mind regarding this weird mix of very inaccurate and harmful stereotypes and tropes that just add up to the list of horrible Arab representations in film. Now I'd like to talk about video games, specifically video games that depict war, and even more specifically American video games that depict war. Conflicts have been a staple throughout history, since the beginning of civilization and up until today. But in video games, when we talk about war, only the most popular form of experiencing war through video games come to mind, and that is the FPS genre. When video games became popular, there weren't that many 3D video games, if at all. 2D video games were the norm, because they were easier to make from the technical point of view and therefore cheaper, and adding a third axis meant more artwork to be done, better and more innovative and advanced game engines and production pipelines to support this new genre. And on top of all of that, computers just weren't yet built to support 3D video games. Once these technical challenges were resolved and the barrier was broken, fast forward to the birth of the FPS genre and its popularization through games like Doom and Quake. At first, these games were about going to hell or another planet, but then Desert Storm came along and that began a trend of video games trying to imitate movies, and the popular movies at the time were movies about the Gulf War. So Desert Storm just depicts that, the Gulf War. Armed US soldiers with names and identities doing missions, fighting unnamed Iraqi NPCs, and therefore another layer if immersion was accessible. You don't just watch the soldiers do it in movies or hear about it in the news, you do it in a video game. And with the popularity of the medium, games like Call of Duty started popping up, the Battlefields, Medal of Honor, Splinter Cell, etc. In Call of Duty Modern Warfare, you have Khalid al-Assad, the guy who is a very big terrorist in Arabia, and you have to shoot all of the Arab NPCs to get him. Call of Duty can also be considered a retelling of the Iraq War, but in this game, Iraq or Arabia actually has nukes. And to cement the previous stereotypes of Arabs being terrorists while not being the masterminds planning everything, Khalid is not even the one pulling all of the strings. The one pulling all of the strings is a Russian guy.
Remember, no Russian.
They are not even given Arabs the luxury of being smart enough to be the head of a terrorist organization. Also, another stereotype that's mentioned briefly is the lusty Arab, and that one is there with Yusuf in GTA 4. Now let's talk about the worst of these games, and the one that I didn't mention yet, and that is 6 Days in Fallujah. It's a 4-player co-op, that's to say, played by 4 players who are on the same team. And let's just read the Steam About section.
6 Days in Fallujah is a first-person tactical shooter that drops you and other players into real-world urban combat that requires real-life tactics.
Created with the help of more than 100 Marines and soldiers who served in the Second Battle of Fallujah, this is urban combat as it's really fought. Say like AI enemies, because who the fuck needs the perspective of the people being invaded and killed, am I right? Will stalk, flank, and ambush you, sneak through tunnels to lure you into traps, and use the same tactics against you that made the Second Battle of Fallujah among the bloodiest in half a century. In 6 days, every time you start a mission, entire buildings change shape inside and out. Enemies take up new positions and unique threats, you will never know what to expect, just like actual combat. So, it's not even real Fallujah, it's a procedurally generated Fallujah, i.e. they made buildings, streets, people and places that would look like Fallujah, but they're not actually Fallujah. Meanwhile, they are claiming that this alleged Fallujah is being realistically depicted. There are no golden paths here. Climb through rooftops, close swing blinds, skip down doors, or climb through windows, the choices are yours, and for the consequences. Early access currently includes all human tactical co-op missions that can take place during both day and night under a variety of weather conditions. I mean, thank fuck they depicted the weather conditions correctly. Midway through 2004 will also give you control of an AI firearm. Then we'll add more missions to introduce civilians. Well, I'm glad they're introducing civilians. And begin our single-player story campaign that draws from specific true stories narrated by the Americans and Iraqis who were there. Well, we'll see about that. Now let's actually talk about the Second Battle of Fallujah. In the spring of 2004, Al-Qaeda in Iraq seized control of the city of Fallujah, using it as a base to brutalize local residents and launch terror attacks across the region. 6 months later, Iraq's Prime Minister ordered civilians to leave the city, so Iraqi, American, and British forces could retake Fallujah together. In just 6 days, the Second Battle of Fallujah had become one of the bloodiest battles in half a century. Now for this part, I would like to read part of the description of the Second Battle of Fallujah from the Encyclopedia Britannica for brevity. The Second Battle of Fallujah was the bloodiest battle of the Iraq War. Some 110 coalition forces were killed, some 600 were wounded in the battle, some 3,000 insurgents were killed or captured, and an unknown number of civilians estimated to be in the thousands were also killed. And to repeat that last sentence again, an unknown number of civilians estimated to be in the thousands was also killed. And I mean, of course, the US Army did not kill those. It is of course the well-rounded number of 3,000 insurgents who have been killed, am I right? Now this game claims to be a realistic depiction of the Second Battle of Fallujah, of an illegal occupation and the war crimes that have been committed by the US and Iraq. And it does not only try to normalize the battle, making it seem that something had to be done and that the US was right and moral to do that, but also in the process they managed to ignore the suffering inflicted on thousands of dead civilians, focusing on the suffering of American soldiers who were deployed there as people who were just following orders, ya haram. This is just what war is like. And in fact, if you go to the Steam reviews, this is what you will exactly see. US veterans who claim the game has helped them get over their past traumas, and people interested in realistic quote-unquote war games being happy about it. Another shitty thing is that in their official gameplay trailer on IGN's YouTube channel, They show interviews from American soldiers talking about how sad they were killing civilians.
Saddam had been captured. The Iraqi army scattered. Lawlessness and fear gave al-Zarqawi his moment, and he was prepared. They seized Fallujah, and the city was the first to suffer under their black banner.
These terrorists were armed to the teeth. No one will fight against them.
It had to be stopped, or the country will turn over to Al-Qaeda.
It was a fortress. It was a well-prepared city, buttressed, waiting for us to come.
The only way you can clear a city is you have to search every house, you have to search every room, and you have to root out every insurgent.
We sustained hundreds and hundreds of casualties. A third of my battalion was killed or wounded.
It was the bunkers they would build inside houses. And you would go in the house, it'd be all quiet. And then they would open up on you or shoot you through a hole in the wall.
If they didn't hit you right away with a machine gun, they would draw you all the way back to the back of the house where there's really nowhere to escape.
There's such a fear, so you're standing in front of the door. You kick down that door, and there's a sense of relief. You only feel it if you survive.
And they show Iraqi civilians talk about how the smart decision was to leave, as if it was their own fucking fault that they stayed there in their homes, portraying those who stayed there as too proud and stubborn to leave their homes for the incoming battle.
So just think, you have this Marine, you're amped up, you got all this adrenaline going through, you kick that door down, and it's like family of 4. And I'm talking to the dad, I'm like, dude, why are you still here? He's like,
عن طريق التلفزيون طلع بقة هذا اياد علاوي كان رئيس الوزراء قال ابو مصعب الزرقاوي موجود في الفلوجه وراح احنا نهجم وناخذه.
فلذلك الفلوجه نقدر نقول من بدايه العمليه طلعوا.
وعائلتي وعائله ابويا الله يرحمه طلعت. فابويا بقى راد يبقى قال ما اطلع.
تعرف اهل الفلوجه القدماء يعني هاي بالنسبه لهم عار بانه يطلع محتل جاي ويطلع من
قال ما اطلع هذا ابقى. قال اموت هنا يابا اطلع قال ما قلت له لا عاد اني وين.
The game is just an abomination on Arab representation in video games, and a clear example of the tactics used by the media in general to dehumanize a certain groups of people. It's literally the meme of we're gonna invade your country and then make a movie 10 years later complaining about how sad it made our soldiers feel. It's fucking... All of that to say that with video games nothing really changed, but on the contrary. With video games becoming as huge of an entertainment medium as they are today, and as they become more immersive with the introduction of VR gaming, US Army propaganda will become even more popular, if not the norm, and killing Arabs and dehumanizing them will become even more realistic than it was before. The Nazis had a reason as to why they were producing anti-Jewish propaganda. They wanted them to be portrayed as the enemy. Whether that enemy is conspiring behind the scenes, controlling the Allied powers to bring an end to the Aryan race and Germany's existence and dreams of expansion, or that enemy is an outsider, living in our country, taking up resources, while destroying our culture and civilization. At first, the enemy was Polish or Czech, and then the enemy became the Russians and their Judeo-Bolshevik threat to our Western culture. The enemy was basically whoever the German government wanted to antagonize depending on their needs at the time. And in a similar fashion, the US needs aren't exactly that different. They want to justify killing whoever they want, and they want to rally support from the public to do it. They want to make the public believe that these people that we want to kill deserve so. For any film to be able to depict war, they need equipment. And this equipment they have to get from the Department of Defense. The DoD has long, open history of making suggestions to movie scripts in exchange for lending Hollywood studios military equipment. This may sound as a shocker if you're living under a rock, but US presidents have been using all of the tools at their disposal since forever to rally support for wars, and amongst the tools used to do that is the leverage the DoD has over Hollywood. An article by The Guardian states, "It's not too difficult to see what both sides get out of it. It saved the filmmakers millions of dollars in props, locations, and special effects. Meanwhile, the military gets to show off its latest equipment to millions of people and depict its personnel in the best possible light." Philip Strupp, director of the entertainment media at the US Department of Defense, states in the same article, "Our desire is that the military are portrayed as good people trying to do the right thing the right way." Here, if we go back to Call of Duty, but this time it's Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, It has been stated by the developers that the game has been developed with Pentagon advisors aiding in the development. When one of the advisors was asked, "What do you think will be the conflict of tomorrow?" While the question in itself is loaded, it shows a realistic depiction of the future's danger, aka the enemy has to go through the Pentagon for an answer. Anyways, the advisor answered, and I'm quoting a Guardian's article here. Apparently the source quickly rolled out China. He said it's too big, it will eventually collapse under its own economic weight. A resurgence of the Cold War with Russia and the consolidation of emergent Islamic extremist states. Instead, the advisor predicted that the next threat to the security of the United States would come from a private military company. It may be some billion-dollar contract gone bad or a sudden tipping point in the ratio between national military and contracted forces. So it seems that the video games are just like films. They're just tools of portraying enemies of the US, amongst which are Arabs, in a way that the US and its military deems as acceptable for its ultimate benefit. Whether that interpretation is through imitation of movies that are directly affected by the DoD's input, if you will, or through the direct advisory of the Pentagon, at the end of the day, the results are the same. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Hollywood's support for the Zionist cause grew exponentially. Before that, it was very limited and very little representation and attention given to Palestine and the Palestinians. But since then, a lot has changed. In early films that needed the help of the Israeli state mainly for authentic shooting locations, Arabs were portrayed as what we would expect them to be portrayed as today, or as Jews were portrayed in the Nazi propaganda, ironically enough. Dirty, irrational outsiders who do not have any legitimate reason to hate the Zionist project. While the Israelis are portrayed as compassionate, courageous, and peace-loving, if only these irrational barbaric Arabs would coexist in peace. Even though these movies commit a blatant falsification of history by not showing the Zionist militias that later formed the Israeli occupation forces, and hid intentionally any Palestinian voices and any mention of the Tantura massacre, for example, the Deir Yassin massacre, the Nakba as a whole, where 1 million Palestinians were expelled from their homes, and we're not counting the ones that were killed here. But what is the impact of all of this? Why is it necessary to portray a people realistically instead of relying on cheap, harmful tropes? And why are these tropes harmful in the first place? Well, for starters, it makes it easy for hungry war criminals in the White House to, well, commit and justify war crimes. It conditions the people who consume these media from a young age to view these others, quote-unquote, as harmful, as barbaric, as backward people who need to be educated by us, the more civilized West. It indoctrinates children and old folks alike. And this shows in the racist remarks visibly Muslim women get in Western societies, in the random checkups at the airports for any brown guy with a beard, in the most shootings of Quebec and Christchurch, in the caricatures made of the Prophet ﷺ that are considered freedom of speech in France, but caricatures of the president and murals of him are not. It shows in the far-right media showing insert random act made by ISIS as something that all Muslims do and actively want to happen. It shows in the hate crimes committed against Sikhs because they are mistaken for Muslims, because they are brown and wear a turban. It shows in a plethora of really stupid and ignorant comments made about the Middle East, Arabs, Muslims, and any brown person, and the hate and crimes committed against them frequently. Well, the tides seem to at least be starting to change as of very recently, hopefully to add a slight push in the opposite direction of misinformation, dehumanization, and hate. There is not much hope about the games industry that I know of. I guess Call of Duty added a playable Arab character, which is only good because she works with Americans, but hey, it's a start. And we're starting to have more Arabs in American media concerned about sharing their experiences, like Rami Youssef and his show Rami, that was highly celebrated in the Arab community as demonstrating an Egyptian American living in the US struggling with his identity, religion, culture, and society. It is available on Hulu. We also got a show called Mo about a Palestinian refugee in Texas stuck between two cultures and trying to get his American citizenship. That one is available on Netflix. And speaking of Netflix, there is also Farha, a film highly celebrated by Palestinians and Arabs for demonstrating a more realistic representation of the Nakba and the plight of the Palestinians during that dark period of history. There are also game developers speaking out about the Arab representation in video games, the loudest of which I can find is Rami Ismail. I really recommend any talk you find of him, and to be honest, his views on Twitter are very good. There is also a beautiful game called Layla and the Shadows of War, made by a Palestinian developer Rashid Abu Aida, which features a story about the 2016 Israeli attack on Gaza. I don't want to spoil it, it's a short game, but please go ahead and play it and support the developer. And in conclusion, my hope is that with globalization and platforms like YouTube, Itch.io, Steam and social media in general, the world would be able to share more of themselves and their cultures with one another, and that we will eventually be able to respect, understand and appreciate one another despite our differences. Everyone right now has a platform, a phone, a camera, a computer, or at least one of those, and they can create. That is how we push in the opposite direction of hate, by creating games, movies, videos, writing about your culture, blogging, religion, just write about your perspective. We need to understand each other. We need to read with a perspective of understanding and the realization that the other is a human. Regardless of you disagreeing with their religious beliefs or political opinions, we need to understand that the other person is a human. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. It took me quite a long time to make this one. Multiple iterations. I reconsidered lots of things while doing it. I do not know if this is the best format it can come out with. I definitely had more things that I wanted to include, but I did not have the time to do so. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, wherever. If you like this and you want me to make more, let me know. This is something that I really enjoyed doing. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed learning. Also, let me know what you think of the background. That one was, I learned while making it, so I hope you like it. Thanks for watching.